Close your eyes and let your mind drift back to a time when gods walked among mortals and the stars wove destinies. This is the tale of Psyche, a mortal whose beauty rivaled the heavens and whose heart endured the greatest trials of love and devotion. Tonight, we embark on a journey filled with courage, family, and the power of forgiveness. Listen closely as the whispers of her world come to life. Before we dive into this captivating tale of love and destiny, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more amazing stories. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. In the small, sunlit village of Thera, life seemed simple and peaceful to an outsider. But for Psyche, it wasn't. Psyche was unlike any other mortal. Born the youngest of 3 daughters, she possessed a beauty so radiant that even the statues of Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, paled in comparison. From the moment she could walk, her people flocked to her. By the time she reached adulthood, her fame had spread across kingdoms. Men came from far and wide, bearing gifts and composing songs in her honor. But not all gifts were kind. In the temple of Aphrodite, her beauty stirred anger. Worshippers stopped bringing offerings to the goddess. They praised Psyche instead, claiming her beauty must be divine. The temples grew quiet, their altars bare. Aphrodite, seated on her celestial throne, heard the whispers of mortal men. Her vanity turned to fury. "This mortal dares to steal my worshippers," she thundered, her voice echoing through Olympus. "She shall suffer for this insolence." That same night, Aphrodite summoned her son, Eros, the god of love. With his bow and arrows, he had caused mortals and gods alike to fall in love, or ruin. Aphrodite's voice was cold as she gave him a command. "Go to the mortal girl Psyche," she ordered. "Use your arrows to make her fall in love with the most hideous, vile creature you can find. Let her beauty be wasted on a life of misery." Eros hesitated, though loyal to his mother. He was curious about this mortal who had angered the gods. "As you wish," he said, disappearing into the night. Psyche's days were empty, despite her father's love and her kingdom's admiration. She often wandered alone through the village gardens, seeking peace. It was there, among the blooming roses, that Eros first saw her. Disguised as a mortal, Eros approached, holding his bow and an arrow tipped with divine power. As he drew closer, he saw more than her beauty. Her eyes carried sorrow, and her steps were slow, as though weighed down by an invisible burden. Psyche noticed the stranger standing near the fountain. "Who are you?" she asked, startled but not afraid. "A traveler," Eros replied, lowering his bow. "Why does one so blessed with beauty seem so troubled?" Psyche smiled faintly. "Beauty is no blessing when it blinds people to who you truly are. They see only a face, not a soul." Eros was struck. In that moment, he made a mistake. Instead of releasing the arrow meant to curse her, his hand faltered. The arrow grazed his own skin. A warmth spread through him, and he knew he had fallen in love with the mortal girl. Eros disappeared before Psyche could ask another question. Confused but intrigued by the encounter, she returned to home. That night, she dreamed of a mysterious figure whose voice promised love unlike any she had known. One faithful day, as she walked through the bustling market, her basket of figs cradled in her arms, she could feel the weight of the villagers' stares. "Look at her," one woman hissed to another, her voice sharp and bitter. "Does she think she's better than us?" "Beautiful, yes," the other replied, narrowing her eyes, "but cursed. Mark my words, nothing good will come of it." Psyche lowered her head and quickened her pace, her cheeks burning. It had always been like this, admiration mixed with resentment. As she passed the butcher's stall, a man named Darius, who was known for his boldness, called out to her. "Psyche, a rose among thorns. When will you let me take you to the festival?" Psyche gave him a polite smile and murmured, "I'm not interested, Darius." "Thank you." He laughed, undeterred. But the butcher's wife shot Psyche a glare so fierce that she hurried away without another word. By the time she returned home, the weight of the day felt unbearable. Her sisters, Melantha and Thais, were waiting for her in the kitchen, their eyes narrowing as she entered. "Did Darius ask you again?" Melantha smirked. "Honestly, Psyche, maybe you should accept. At least then the rest of us could get some attention for a change." "Leave her alone," their father Callias said as he walked in, his voice tired but firm. He was a good man, though the years had not been kind to him. Ever since their mother passed, he had done his best to raise the three sisters. But with dwindling finances and growing tensions, the household was far from harmonious. "Thank you, Father," Psyche whispered, placing the figs on the table. That night, as the family prepared for bed, there was a knock at the door. Callias opened it cautiously to find an old woman standing there. She was hunched over, her hair white as snow and her eyes sharp despite her frailty. "May I have some water, kind sir?" she rasped. "Of course," Callias replied, ushering her inside. Psyche quickly fetched a cup and handed it to the old woman, who accepted it with trembling hands. As the old woman drank, she looked up at Psyche with an intensity that made her shiver. "You're kind, child," she said, her voice low and gravelly. "But kindness will not save you from what is to come." Psyche blinked in confusion. "I don't understand." The old woman set the cup down and grabbed Psyche's wrist. Her grip was iron strong, belying her frail appearance. "Your beauty is a gift and a curse. The gods are watching you, and not all of them are pleased." Before Psyche could respond, a deafening crack of thunder shook the house. The family rushed outside to see the source, and their breath caught in their throats. A bolt of lightning had struck the village altar, splitting it in two. The air grew heavy, and a voice that seemed to come from the heavens boomed across the village. "To save your people, the most beautiful must wed the monstrous." The villagers, who had gathered outside their homes, fell to their knees in terror. Callias turned pale as his gaze fell on Psyche. "No," he whispered. "It cannot be." Melantha's eyes flashed with anger and jealousy. "Of course it's her. Who else could it be? This is what happens when you're too perfect for your own good." Psyche looked at her sister, horrified. "I didn't ask for this." "Enough," Callias shouted, his voice trembling. He turned to the old woman, who now stood at the edge of the crowd, her face unreadable. "What does this mean? What must we do?" The old woman pointed a gnarled finger at Psyche. "The gods demand a sacrifice. She must be taken to the mountain and left there as a bride for the monstrous god who dwells in its shadows. Only then will your village be spared." The crowd erupted in murmurs, their fear palpable. "This is madness," Thais cried, clutching her father's arm. "We can't let her go." But Melantha sneered. "And what if we don't? Do you want to see the gods destroy us all?" Psyche's heart pounded in her chest. Her mind raced with fear and confusion, but one thought rose above the rest. She couldn't let her family or her village suffer because of her. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. Callias turned to her, his eyes wide with despair. "No, Psyche, I won't let you." "You don't have a choice, Father," she replied softly. "If this is what the gods demand, then I must obey." The villagers began to murmur their approval, relieved that the beautiful girl was willing to save them. But as Psyche looked at their faces, some sympathetic, others cold, she felt a deep loneliness settle in her heart. The old woman stepped forward, her expression softening. "You are brave, child, but bravery alone will not save you. Remember this: the greatest challenges are not faced with strength, but with trust." Before Psyche could ask what she meant, the old woman vanished, leaving only the faint scent of wildflowers in her wake. The day came too quickly. The village, shrouded in an eerie silence, seemed to hold its breath. Psyche stood at the edge of the mountain, her thin white gown fluttering in the wind. She felt exposed and vulnerable, like a lamb being led to slaughter. Her father, Callias, stood by her side, his eyes red from sleepless nights and tears he couldn't hold back. He gripped her hands tightly, as if he could anchor her to safety by sheer will. "Psyche, I beg you, run away. We can leave this cursed village and start anew." His voice cracked with desperation. Psyche shook her head gently. "Where would we go, Father? The gods are everywhere. If I flee, the whole village will suffer." Her sisters stood a few paces away, their faces a mix of guilt and resentment. Melantha, ever the practical one, broke the silence. "You're doing the right thing, Psyche. At least your beauty is good for something." "Melantha!" Thais snapped, her eyes brimming with tears. "She's our sister." Psyche gave them a small smile, her heart heavy. "It's all right, Thais. I understand." She turned to Melantha. "Take care of Father for me." Melantha looked away, her jaw tightening. The villagers gathered in the distance, whispering amongst themselves. Some pitied Psyche, others envied her, but none dared to speak up. The oracle's words had been clear. Only her sacrifice could save them. The priest stepped forward, his face grave. "It is time." Callias fell to his knees, clutching Psyche's gown. "Please don't take my daughter. She's all I have left." Psyche knelt and placed a gentle hand on his cheek. "Father, you raised me to be strong. Now I must be. I love you." The priest motioned for Psyche to follow, and she walked toward the mountain's edge with trembling legs. The villagers bowed their heads, avoiding her gaze. As she reached the designated spot, a gust of wind howled through the air, carrying with it a strange, otherworldly scent, like roses and ash. The priest began to chant, his voice echoing off the rocks. "Bride of the gods, we offer you to the one who dwells in shadows. May your sacrifice bring peace to our lands." Psyche stood still, her heart racing as the priest placed a garland of flowers on her head. The sun began to set, casting the mountain in a golden glow. The villagers retreated, leaving her alone. As Psyche ventured further into the unknown, her story became even more intriguing. If you're enjoying this journey so far, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to discover. The silence was deafening. For a long time, nothing happened. Psyche's fear turned into exhaustion as she sank to her knees, the cold ground biting into her skin. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not ready to die," she whispered to the wind. "But if this is what the gods want, so be it." Suddenly, the ground beneath her trembled. Her eyes flew open as a shadowy figure emerged from the forest, its form obscured by the fading light. It moved with an unnatural grace, its footsteps silent despite its massive size. Psyche scrambled backward, her breath hitching. Who are you? The figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised an arm, and Psyche felt a strange pull, as if her body no longer obeyed her. She was lifted into the air, a soft, invisible force, cradling her like a child. The last thing she saw before darkness consumed her was the figure's glowing golden eyes, watching her with an intensity that made her shiver. When Psyche awoke, she found herself lying on a soft bed, the sheets smoother than anything she had ever touched. The room around her was vast and ornate, with high ceilings and golden walls that shimmered faintly in the light of flickering torches. She sat up slowly, her head spinning. "Where am I?" she murmured. A soft, melodious voice answered her. "You are safe, my bride." Psyche turned sharply, but there was no one in sight. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "I am your husband," the voice replied. "But do not fear me. You will never want for anything here." Psyche's heart pounded in her chest. "Husband? Show yourself." There was a pause, and then the voice spoke again, softer this time. "That is the one thing I cannot do. You must trust me, Psyche. Trust is the foundation of all love." Psyche's hands clenched into fists. "How can I trust someone who hides from me?" Before the voice could answer, the door to her room opened, and invisible hands began to guide her. Psyche stumbled forward, her fear giving way to awe as she entered a grand hall. A feast was laid out on a long table, with golden plates and goblets that seemed to sparkle with an inner light. "Eat," the voice said. "You must be hungry." Psyche hesitated, but her growling stomach won. She took a bite of bread and was startled by how delicious it was. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, though the questions in her mind remained. For days, Psyche lived in the palace, surrounded by luxury and comfort. Invisible servants attended to her every need, and the disembodied voice spoke to her often, always kind, but always distant. At night, she felt the presence of her husband beside her, though she couldn't see him. His warmth and gentle words began to soothe her fears, but curiosity gnawed at her. Who was he? Why wouldn't he show himself? Her unease grew when the voice said one day, "Your family will visit soon, but be warned, they will try to sow doubt in your heart. Do not listen to them." "My family?" Psyche gasped. "They're alive." "Yes," the voice replied. "I would not harm them, but they do not understand our bond. You must trust me, Psyche. Promise me you will." Psyche hesitated, her heart torn. I promise." But deep down, she wasn't sure she could keep that promise. Psyche could hardly contain her excitement when she heard that her family was coming to visit. Though she had adjusted to life in the mysterious palace, loneliness often crept into her heart. The thought of seeing her father and sisters again filled her with hope. When the day arrived, the invisible servants led Psyche to a grand courtyard surrounded by flowering trees that seemed to sparkle in the sunlight. A marble fountain bubbled softly in the center, and there, stepping hesitantly through the golden gates, were her father and sisters. "Father!" Psyche cried, running to him. She threw her arms around him, and for a moment, the weight of her sacrifice lifted. "My child," Callias whispered, holding her tightly. "I thought I'd never see you again." Melantha and Thais stood behind him, their expressions a mixture of awe and unease as they took in their surroundings. This is where you live?" Melantha asked, her eyes wide. Psyche nodded, smiling. "It's a magical place. Everything I need is provided for me." Thais frowned. "And your husband? Where is he?" Psyche's smile faltered. He doesn't show himself." What? Melantha's voice was sharp. You mean you haven't even seen him? Psyche, that's... He's kind, Psyche interrupted quickly. He takes care of me. I trust him. Melantha exchanged a glance with Thais, her lips tightening. Psyche, don't you think that's strange? A husband who won't show his face? What if he's hiding something? Thais stepped closer, her voice soft and worried. We're just concerned for you. What if he's not who he says he is? What if he's dangerous? Callias placed a hand on Psyche's shoulder. My daughter, I only want you to be happy. But if there's any danger, if you're not safe, you must tell us. Psyche's heart ached as she looked at her family. She wanted to reassure them, to tell them that everything was fine. But the truth was she didn't know. I'm safe, she said finally, though the words felt hollow. Melantha wasn't convinced. Her sharp eyes swept over the courtyard. This palace is too perfect. And that voice, whoever he is, he's hiding something. Mark my words, Psyche. You're being deceived. Thais hesitated, then nodded. Maybe you should find out the truth. If he really loves you, he shouldn't have anything to hide. Psyche's mind spun. Her husband had warned her about this moment, but now that it was here, doubt began to creep into her heart. That night, Psyche lay awake in her bed, her thoughts a storm of emotions. She loved the gentle voice that had comforted her, the invisible presence that had made her feel safe. But her sister's words echoed in her mind. What if he's hiding something? What if he's dangerous? The question gnawed at her until she couldn't ignore it anymore. Quietly, she slipped out of bed and crept through the dark halls of the palace. She had seen a storeroom earlier, filled with strange and magical objects. Perhaps she could find something there to reveal the truth. Her bare feet made no sound on the marble floors as she entered the storeroom. It was filled with treasures, golden goblets, jeweled mirrors, and glowing orbs. But one item caught her attention, a simple candle and a flint striker lying beside it. Psyche picked it up, her hands trembling. The voice had told her to trust, but how could she trust someone who remained hidden? That night, as the palace grew silent, Psyche lit the candle. The warm light filled the room, casting soft shadows on the walls. Her heart pounded as she turned toward the bed. And there he was. Psyche gasped, nearly dropping the candle. Her husband was no monster but a god. Eros, the god of love himself. His golden hair gleamed in the candlelight, and his powerful wings, soft as down, were folded against his back. But as Psyche stared in awe, a single drop of hot wax fell from the candle onto Eros' shoulder. He stirred, his eyes opening. "What have you done?" he whispered, his voice filled with pain and sadness. Psyche stepped back, her heart breaking. I needed to know. I couldn't. You doubted me, Eros said, rising from the bed. His wings unfurled, and his expression was one of deep betrayal. I warned you, Psyche. Trust was all I asked for. I'm sorry, she cried, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please forgive me. Eros shook his head, his golden eyes filled with sorrow. You have broken our bond. Now I must leave. No. Psyche reached for him, but he was already fading, his form dissolving into light. Eros, please. His final words echoed in the empty room. You must prove your love, Psyche. Only then can you find me again. The palace was no longer a place of comfort. Without Eros, his golden walls felt cold and lifeless. Psyche wandered the empty halls, her heart heavy with regret. She replayed his words over and over in her mind. You must prove your love. But how? Where could she even begin? Determined not to lose him forever, Psyche left the palace. As she stepped beyond its gates, the lush landscape faded, replaced by a barren wilderness. She clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders, the harsh winds biting at her skin. "I will find you, Eros," she whispered. "No matter what it takes." Psyche wandered for days, surviving on little more than wild berries and stream water. Her once soft hands became calloused, her feet blistered and sore. But she pressed on, driven by love and guilt. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she came upon a crumbling temple. Its walls were overgrown with ivy, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Inside, the goddess Demeter stood amidst the ruins, her face sorrowful. The crops in her hands withered as soon as she touched them. "Great Demeter," Psyche said, bowing low, "please help me. I seek Eros, the god of love. Tell me how to find him." Demeter regarded her with weary eyes. "Why should I help you, mortal? It was your own actions that drove him away." Psyche's voice trembled. "Because I love him. I made a mistake, but I am willing to do anything to make it right." Demeter sighed. "Very well. I will give you a task. Complete it, and I will guide you to someone who can help. Fail, and you will never see Eros again." "I'll do it," Psyche said without hesitation. Demeter led her to a massive field filled with wheat, its stalks shimmering gold in the moonlight. "By morning, you must sort these grains into separate piles: wheat, barley, and oats. Do this alone, and do not stop until it is done." Psyche's heart sank as she looked at the endless field, but she nodded, determined. As she began, her hands worked frantically, but it was impossible to make any real progress. The grains seemed to multiply with every handful she sorted. Exhaustion set in, and despair clawed at her chest. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the silence. Psyche looked up to see a line of ants marching toward her. They swarmed the field, their tiny bodies moving with incredible speed. "Psyche, we will help you," the leader of the ants said, its voice small but clear. "Eros once saved our colony from destruction. We owe him this debt." Tears of gratitude filled Psyche's eyes. "Thank you." The ants worked tirelessly through the night, sorting the grains into perfect piles. When the first rays of dawn appeared, the task was complete. Demeter returned, her expression softening. "You have succeeded. I will send you to the goddess Aphrodite, for she alone can guide you to Eros." Psyche's relief was short-lived. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was far from welcoming. Her golden temple gleamed like the sun, but her demeanor was cold and cruel. "So, you are the mortal who broke my son's heart," Aphrodite said, her lips curling into a disdainful smile. "You dare come to me for help?" "I love him," Psyche said firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes to win him back." Aphrodite laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "We'll see how strong your love truly is. Complete these tasks, and perhaps I'll consider helping you." She handed Psyche a small golden box. "Take this to the underworld and ask Persephone, the queen of the dead, to fill it with a drop of her beauty. Return it to me untouched." Psyche's blood ran cold. The underworld was a place of no return, but she nodded. "I'll do it." Reaching the underworld was no small feat. Psyche traveled to a cliff where a secret entrance was said to lie. There, she encountered a decrepit old man who warned her of the dangers ahead. "Do not eat or drink anything in the underworld," he said. "And do not look back, no matter what you hear." Psyche thanked him and descended into the dark abyss. The air grew heavy. and the cries of lost souls echoed around her. She kept her eyes forward, even when ghostly whispers called her name. Finally, she reached Persephone's throne room. The Queen of the Dead was strikingly beautiful, her presence both intimidating and gentle. "You seek my beauty?" Persephone asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Psyche said, bowing low. "Aphrodite has sent me to retrieve it." Persephone smiled faintly. "Very well." She handed Psyche the golden box, now glowing faintly. "Remember," Persephone warned, "the contents are not for mortal eyes." Psyche climbed back to the surface, the box clutched tightly in her hands. Exhausted but relieved, she could see Aphrodite's temple in the distance. But curiosity tugged at her. If just one drop of beauty could please the gods, what might it do for me? She hesitated, then opened the box. A dark mist exploded outward, enveloping her. It was not beauty, but a deadly curse meant for the unwary. Psyche collapsed, her vision fading. As Psyche lay unconscious, the curse threatening to take her life, the heavens stirred. Eros, who had been watching from afar, felt her pain like a dagger to his heart. Despite his anger and disappointment, he couldn't bear to see the woman he loved suffer. With a powerful beat of his golden wings, Eros descended to the mortal realm. He found Psyche sprawled on the ground, the cursed mist swirling around her. "My foolish, beautiful Psyche," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "Why could you not trust me?" Eros reached for her, his divine light cutting through the dark mist. He gathered her into his arms, his touch banishing the curse. Her breathing steadied, and her eyes fluttered open. "Eros?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "You nearly destroyed yourself," he said, his tone a mix of relief and exasperation. "Why did you open the box?" I thought it could make me worthy of you," Psyche confessed, her voice breaking. "I wanted to be perfect for you." Eros sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You are already perfect, Psyche. Love is not about perfection. It's about trust and acceptance. Can you trust me now?" "Yes," Psyche said, her heart swelling with emotion. "I'll never doubt you again." Eros smiled faintly, his golden eyes softening. "Then it's time to face my mother." Eros carried Psyche to Aphrodite's temple. The goddess of love stood at the entrance, her expression unreadable as she watched her son approach. "So, you've defied me, Eros," she said, her voice cold. "And for this mortal?" "She is more than a mortal, mother," Eros replied, his tone firm. "She is my wife and my equal in courage and love." Aphrodite's gaze flicked to Psyche, who stood tall despite her trembling hands. "You've endured much, girl, but love is not enough. Mortals are fickle. How do I know you won't betray him again?" "I won't," Psyche said, her voice steady. "I've learned my lesson. I was blinded by fear and doubt, but I know now that love requires faith. I'll spend my life proving my devotion if I must." Eros stepped forward. "She has proven herself already. If you cannot accept her, then you cannot accept me." Aphrodite stared at her son, her expression softening ever so slightly. Finally, she sighed. "Very well. If she means so much to you, I will bless this union. But know this, Psyche, betray my son again, and even the gods won't save you." "I understand," Psyche said, bowing deeply. With Aphrodite's blessing, Eros and Psyche's union was acknowledged by the gods. Zeus himself summoned Psyche to Olympus, where he offered her a goblet of ambrosia. "Drink, mortal," Zeus commanded, his thunderous voice echoing across the halls. You have earned your place among us." Psyche took the goblet, her hands trembling. As the ambrosia touched her lips, a warmth spread through her body, and she felt herself transformed. Her mortal frailty melted away, replaced by divine strength and beauty. The gods welcomed her with open arms, and she and Eros were finally reunited, free from the doubts and trials that had plagued them. After Psyche's ascent to divine status and the resolution with Aphrodite, her heart longed for a reunion with her family. She had not forgotten them, despite the many challenges she faced. She knew that in their own way, her family had suffered just as much as she had, and the time had come for her to return and change their lives. One bright morning, Psyche made her decision. She would visit her family, not as the mortal girl who had once been scorned, but as a goddess capable of changing their lives forever. Psyche descended from Olympus with Eros at her side, a radiant being now immortal, her heart full of hope and forgiveness. The two returned to the village where her journey had begun. The once silent altar, split by the wrath of the gods, was now bathed in celestial light, a sign of divine favor. The villagers, awestruck by the couple's arrival, whispered among themselves. Psyche, no longer just the girl they envied or pitied, stood before them as a goddess, her presence commanding respect and admiration. She approached her family's home, her steps purposeful. Callias was the first to see her. His weathered face, marked by grief and regret, softened as his eyes filled with tears. "Psyche?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "Father," Psyche said, her voice softer yet powerful as she stood before him. Callias looked up in astonishment, blinking as he tried to process the sight before him. "Psyche? Is it really you?" Psyche knelt before him, her divine aura radiating around her, casting a gentle glow. "Yes, Father, it is me. I've come to bring you the happiness you deserve." Tears filled Callias' eyes. "You have always been the light of my life, but I had thought you were lost forever." "I was, Father," Psyche admitted, "but I have found my way. And now it's time to make things right." The reunion was bittersweet. Melantha and Thais stood at a distance, both taken aback by the transformation in Psyche. Thais, who had always adored her sister, ran forward and embraced her warmly. "Oh, Psyche, I knew you were special," Thais said, her eyes shining with joy. "I always believed in you." Melantha, however, stood still, her face unreadable. A deep discomfort lingered in her eyes, and despite Psyche's radiant presence, she couldn't quite bring herself to smile. The envy that had festered for so long in Melantha's heart was hard to erase, and she struggled to hide it. Yet she couldn't deny the truth. Psyche's beauty had not only shaped her life, but also overshadowed her own. Psyche saw the way her sister looked at her, and despite the past, still reached out with compassion. "Melantha," she said softly, "I've always loved you. I never wished to hurt you." Melantha's expression softened, but the old bitterness remained, lingering in her heart. "It's not your fault, Psyche," she muttered. "It's the world. It's always been the world." Psyche gave her sister a gentle smile. "I know, Melantha, and I know that it's hard to accept change. But sometimes, we must let go of what weighs us down in order to move forward. I'm here now, and I want nothing but peace between us." The words hung in the air, and Melantha remained silent, contemplating them. With a wave of her hand, Psyche transformed their humble home into a grand yet welcoming place. The fields surrounding the village bloomed with vibrant flowers, and the once struggling town thrived under her blessing. Eros, standing beside her, extended his own gifts, ensuring the prosperity of the people. With time, the family began to heal. Psyche, with her divine wisdom and newfound power, helped her father in ways she had never imagined possible. She used her gifts to grant him health and vitality, and soon, Callias no longer seemed the frail man he once was. His strength returned, and with it, his hopes for the future. Thais, ever the loving sister, was happy to see Psyche flourishing, but she too had her own path to follow. As she matured, Thais became a respected figure in her own right, not overshadowed by her sister's divine presence, but shining in her own light. She married a kind and noble man, one who truly saw her for who she was. Together, they built a life filled with love and mutual respect. As for Melantha, her journey was not as easy. The years of jealousy and resentment had left deep scars in her heart. But as she watched her sisters thrive, she began to realize the truth. Beauty, no matter how captivating, would never replace the love and respect she had longed for. It was not too late for her to change, to let go of her past hurts. Eventually, Melantha found a suitor, a man who loved her not for her outward appearance, but for her intelligence and strength. She learned slowly but surely that beauty came in many forms, and it wasn't always the one that was most obvious. Years passed, and the lives of Psyche, Thais, and Melantha grew more peaceful. Callias, though not immortal, lived a long and contented life, surrounded by his daughters and their families. The wounds of the past healed, and the love between them grew stronger. Psyche had indeed changed their lives, not by grand gestures, but through patience, compassion, and understanding. Her love for her family was unwavering, and in return, her family too had learned the importance of trust, acceptance, and forgiveness. Psyche's heart swelled with happiness as she looked upon her family, knowing that their bond had been mended, and that they would never again be torn apart by envy or misunderstanding. She had not only changed their lives, she had transformed their hearts. Eros and Psyche's love became a legend, a story told for centuries as a testament to the power of trust and devotion. Together, they ruled their realm with kindness and wisdom, their bond unbreakable. In time, Psyche became a goddess of the soul, guiding mortals through their struggles and teaching them the lessons she had learned. And though their journey had been fraught with pain and challenges, Eros and Psyche found their happy ending, proving that true love, once tested and proven, could conquer even the gods. That's it for today's tale of Eros and Psyche. If you love this story, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share it with others who enjoy captivating tales. See you next time. Bye bye.